Welcome back. It's a rather rainy Saturday here, so I figured it's a good time to continue working on this old car. If you remember last time, we got it running. Off camera, I've even moved it up and down the driveway a little bit. I don't think the electrical is fully working. The lights and stuff work, but I don't think the charging system is working, so we'll have to look at that at some point. But this car definitely needs brakes. The transmission brake works, but it needs brakes. So let's dive into that. The brake system on a car is fairly simple. This one even more so, as it is a single circuit brake system, which means there is one brake line that goes to all four wheels. Modern cars have dual circuit systems, which means that the front wheels and the back wheels are separate. This is for safety, as if a brake line should break, you only lose half your brakes, whereas in this car, you lose all of them. How it works is when you push the brake pedal, this lever moves, pushes that plunger into the master cylinder, which pushes fluid through the brake lines to all the wheel cylinders. Now, I was originally going to replace just the wheel cylinders in the master cylinder, but then I got to looking at the brake lines and noticed that, well, the main brake line has this giant kink in it. And they can't all be in very good shape because with the paint peeling up, brake fluid is probably leaking. Now, excuse the rat's nest of wires, which could explain why a lot of the electrical doesn't work. But I think I'm going to end up, just for safety, replacing all of it. Alright, we're going to start with the master cylinder. Looks like it's fairly simple to take apart. There's 3 bolts holding it in, and then a pin that takes it to the brake pedal. These, I think, just pull up if they're not rusted. That there is your brake switch. Just a pressure switch. Senses the pressure from you putting on the brakes, connects these two, turns the light in the back of the car on. I have a feeling that, like most things, this will be easier if there wasn't a car around it. I'm gonna need a breaker bar on that. Well, there's one. If you're wondering what I'm using as a cheater bar, it's the broken tailpiece to a torque wrench. Just so happens to be the perfect size to fit over the handle of the ratchet. There's 2. The third one's going to be interesting because it's underneath all of this. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to it. From underneath the car. Let's see, no extension. If I can get to it back here. Just barely. Maybe with a 5/8 wrench. Here's one of those gear wrenches I was telling you about. Come on, break free. There we go. Alright, so now that we got the master cylinder out of the car, you can kind of take a look at it. Boot's all tore up, the rear seal is leaking pretty bad. This can be rebuilt. Maybe a project for another day. It'll probably end up just in a bin of parts that I take off this vehicle. Let's go take a look at the new one. Here's the replacement. You can see new boot. This is where you put the fluid in, spot for the brake switch, and your two outlets. You can choose whether you want to go out to the bottom or out to the front. Seeing how the gearbox is right here for steering, probably will come out the bottom. But let's put this in the vise and start working on assembling some of the components. Now here is the new brake switch. It's a little bit different from the old one. Not too concerned about that, as like I said, probably going to be redoing all the wiring. Should be good. I'm going to place this here because like I said, I have a feeling because of the gearbox being in the way, it's going to be too much to bend out, bend over, bend back. It's a lot easier just to go down, do a radius, and then go to where we need it to. We'll snug these up later when they're in the car. But alright. This is a rather interesting drain plug. It is literally just at a plug. There's a little hole in the center and off to the side to allow breathing, which is important because as you use your brakes, the level and the reservoir goes down as parts stay expanded. Alright, let's bolt this back in, see how it fits. Alright, now that we're back in the car, this rod pushes against the back of the master cylinder. That's what causes the brakes to activate. We're going to clean it up, add a little bit of grease, try to clean up some of this bore that the cylinder sits in, reattach everything. Alright, I cleaned that up nice and smooth. Gave it a quick shots of black paint to kind of seal it up. Let's add a little bit of grease onto this so that it can stay nice and clean. You don't want that to get rusted, so we'll put a little bit of grease on it, bolt the master cylinder back on. For the grease I used just wheel bearing grease. Let's see if we can get this to slide on back in. Get one of these bolts started. And make sure that we got good play. Like I said, you want that to be able to retract back all the way so that it can relieve the pressure back into the master cylinder. With the brake line not there, we might have an easier time putting in that bottom one. So that's installed. Now I assume that taking the wheel off, you just pop this cover off and there'll be one like castle nut in the center. Pull the pin, unbolt it, and the wheel will come off. We'll probably have to fight the shoes. I might have to loosen up those adjusters. So let's see how easy this is to come out. There we go. Interestingly enough, there are 5 lug nuts. around here. So I wonder if the wheel does come off of the drum. Wow. Let's break them free, see what goes on. See if this will take off. Yeah, it's a no on that one. Might have to drop the car down and stand on a four-way. Yep. Let's go do that. Well, the reverse. Okay. Well. Alright. Looks like we have to take that center off anyways. Left-handed thread. Strange. Alright. So I got a thread off, and inside there should be a castle nut. Take this off the kingpin. That drum's pretty solid on that. Oh, that wasn't too bad. Ooh, a lot of grease in there. And there. The pin. So how this works, the large nut with a bunch of notches in all the flats. And there's a hole in the middle of the kingpin. So you tighten it until it's snug, and then you back it off until the hole lines up with one of these notches. You slide the pin in, and that's what keeps it all together. Alright. Put you in there. Now here's that castle nut I was telling you about. You can see the notches. So you tighten this down until everything's snug. It's kind of hard to turn. Then you back it off until one of these notches lines up. You put the pin in and bend the pin so it doesn't come out. Now, on here, you'll have a washer, outer bearing. Looks like it's in pretty good shape, but while we're here, might as well replace it and all the grease as well. I hate packing bearings. There is no way to keep yourself clean while doing that. Now, might have to hit those two adjusters to loosen up the shoes. We might be able to pound this with a hammer and work its way off. Rust is falling out of the brakes. That's never a good sign. Alright. Oh yeah. So here's your inner bearings, and an awful lot of crud. All right. This is a lot simpler than normal drum brakes. Normal drum brakes will have adjusters, an automatic adjuster at the bottom, and a ton of springs. This has one return spring in your wheel cylinder. Your wheel cylinder works similar to the master cylinder, just in reverse. There's a little spring inside, and then there's two pistons. When the fluid gets pushed in between the two pistons, they push out, push the shoes out, stop the vehicle, and this return spring pulls it all back in. You have adjusters at the top and adjusters at the bottom. Now, why the adjusters are on the inside of the drummer, I don't know. It would be easier to have them on the outside, because then you don't have to go through all this rigmarole just to adjust your shoes. Now, rear brakes, you have to adjust them every now and then, but front brakes, because they do all the steering, one wheel is always going to be going faster than the other, and you're braking around turns, you're going to be wearing one brake faster than the other. I think this is an organic brake pad. I think this brake material is just leather. That one's metal. This one is all decomposed. Some kind of fiber, at least. Huh. Alright, so we're going to be replacing all of this. New shoes, new wheel cylinder, new soft line. And we're going to be doing that to all four corners. Now, these are more than just a beret, because I actually know somebody who lost an eye while taking one of these springs off. So they are not something to be messed with. Alright. So, let's see if I can get this to turn. This here is your adjuster. It's a little cog that pushes against this. So when you adjust it, it pushes here and pushes this out, so that you have the proper distance between your drum and your shoe. Take this boot off. Oh yeah. This wheel cylinder is very rusted. Boots are in pretty good shape, other than the rust getting around the seals in the piston. Looks like that could actually be rebuilt. Now when you hammer something, you want to use a brass hammer. I'm not that fancy. So I'll take a nut, thread it on the back of the bolt that I'm about to hit, so that I don't damage the threads. It will take the impact and put it over a larger area. And tappa. There we go. Now this looks like a modern semi-metallic brake shoe. That looks like leather. leather. All right. All right. Now, you can see that spring has sprung. This is a very interesting brake setup because not only I think that shoe has a leather pad on it, it also has copper rivets. Now let me show you what I'm talking about. This is wild. Absolutely wild. Oh, come on. Check this out. It's like you can just peel it off. It's like fiber. My luck, this is asbestos, and you know, I just took 10 years off my life. You're lucky you're on camera. But yeah, look, it's a fiber brake pad. Wild. All right. Next to come off is the wheel cylinder. That is going to involve turning the wheel, breaking the brake line free of it, and then there's two bolts that hold it on. There we go. Alright. Yeah, everything today is 3/4 of an inch. Now, one of the other reasons why I want to replace these soft lines is, you know, as I said, single circuit brake system, but whoever did these brakes last, well, they used washers in the wrong wheel cylinder. I mean not wheel cylinder, soft line. They used a soft line for a caliper, not a caliper, and just a stack of washers to make it all work. It is unique and wrong. So, if you're one of those people that, when working on a car, constantly have the urge to stick out your tongue, just remember, there's a lot of grease and brake fluid, neither of which tastes good. Wow. Everything's so rusted that washers are breaking. Hey, a little bit of a love tap, and we have ourselves a wheel cylinder. So, brake fluid goes in there. That's your bleeder for getting air out of the system. And one shoe goes in there, one shoe goes in there. Like I said, a lot of rust, but all in all, it can be rebuilt. And there are plenty of rebuild kits available. All right. All right. So, new wheel cylinder. We'll place it over here. But first, you want your brakes to be as clean as possible, which this very much isn't. And because I'm the king of the wrong tool for the wrong job, this should be a metal brush, but all I can find is nylon. So through the magic of editing, you won't have to watch all the rather fun scrubbing that went on to clean this up. There's still some rust, but all the grime is off, which is the important bit. So first to install is the new wheel cylinder. That should bolt on just like the old one bolted off. That new wheel cylinder. Is where is neutral on this? We'll have to play that one by ear. Alright, so ran into a little bit of a problem with the new shoes. The hole that this cam bolt wasn't the right size. So after fussing with it for a little bit, I was able to get it to go in. So now these are ready to install. I've also purchased replacement springs. Like I said, those springs are not something to be messed with. Alright, now the fun of adjusting all this. Alright, so the shoes are retracted in as much as they can be. Let me hit this with a brush. All right. That's how it's supposed to spin. Alright, so we need to do this about 12 more times. As we slowly adjust the brakes out until they're just starting to rub. A little bit of drag. It's supposed to be 12 thousandths on the top, 6 thousandths on the bottom, but we're going to go with enough. Here. Alright, I can hear it just starting to drag. So that's where we'll keep that. Now, for the fun part of the bearings. Now, the question then becomes, how does the rear bearing come out? Hopefully it's not pressed in.
but like I said, there is no clean way of doing this. You want to get all the grease off of all this stuff that you're going to reuse. The old grease has dirt in it, and from heat cycling, well, it's lost its lubrication properties. It becomes more of a hindrance than a help. I'll do the rear bearing first. Alright, so on these bearings, they're tapered. So you have all these rollers. Kingpin sits inside here, hub sits on this side here, you got the race in between. What you want to do is take grease and press it into here until it comes out the other side. You want to pack this bearing full of grease, so you'll be packing it and rolling it, and it's a rather filthy job. And it's best to make sure your hands are as clean and free of debris as possible. You don't want to pack dirt into the bearings. And make all kind of fancy tools that you fill up with grease and put the bearing into it and squeeze, and it oozes it through. I don't have one of those. I imagine they work just fine. But you can see I'm packing in here until it's oozing out the other side, and then I just keep working my way around. Got anything interesting to add there, Sadie? And there are different types of grease, so you want to make sure you use ones for wheel bearings, because temperature and application are important. You don't want one of these to seize while you're driving down the road, and you don't want it to break and come apart for the same reason. Alright, and once you're done packing a bearing, you can see there's very little gaps where there's no grease. All the rollers have grease. I'll take some grease. We'll take some grease up the raceway. Place the bearing in. Alright. It's one bearing down. 7 more to go. Isn't that right, Sadie? You anything interesting this week? Chasing any squirrels? Now, if you notice, this has a recess, this side doesn't. The recess is to protect the bearing. If you put it on backwards, you'll bind both sides of the bearing, where this one here has a recess and you only touch one part of the bearing and allowing the other one to spin. The toughest part about doing that is making sure that it's level and that you don't get grease all over your brake surfaces. Alright. Now, same thing, front bearing, or outer bearing. Alright, and here is what front bearing looks like. all packed with grease. Okay, now you also want to grease the kingpin and put some extra grease in the cap and inside the rotor. What happens is driving down, the bearings get hot, the grease thins. Well, if you don't add extra grease, well, you'll start running low on it. So take our front bearing, slide it on in. Now, just like how the back had that washer, that make sure you put pressure on one part of the bearing and not both. The front has the same. Then the castle nut. Alright, well, after a quick run to the store to get a new cotter pin, let's get this wheel finished up. You want it to be tight enough that you can feel it kind of dragging on the wheel, and then you loosen it up till you get to a spot to put it in. You don't want it too loose, because then you start getting end play. And you don't want it too tight, because that restricts your bearings. That should be good. That pin will lock the nut, stop it from falling apart. And we'll take the grease, we'll fill up the cap with it, thread the cap back on, put the wheel back on. This here will be done. I'm going to move on to the next wheels. I'll bring you guys back if anything interesting happens. So, while you were gone, I went and did the passenger front wheel. But seeing how next one is a drive wheel, figured you might want to check it out with me. I also put the whole car up on jack stands. Alright. So, looking on the inside, there's one rather large nut with a cotter pin. I don't know if there's any bearings. Check this out. A little bit different of a hub. Let's get a cotter pin out. Now, when I bought this car, this wheel was originally frozen, and only through messing with it was able to get it to break free a little bit. Like that's gonna come off. Whoa! I don't think it's going to free up anything. But if we pry and hammer, might be able to get something to happen. There we go. I'm almost positive that there's some kind of fancy puller for this. Looking at it, looks like there is a there is. So it's keyed. There is a keyway. No splines, but yeah. And more of that fibrous brake pad stuff. It's nuts. The thing only makes 45, 50 horsepower. I guess a keyway is all you need. Don't need no fancy splines. Oh, let's put that heavy in there. Alright, other than that, it looks no different than the front. Alright, both of these are that fibrous. Well, that one's not, but this one here, it is. That's weird. That is absolutely wild. Alright, so we can tap both of those out. Unhook this from the line. And clean up all whatever the hell that is. This looks like it still has the original banjo fitting on it. The front wheel cylinders had a little banjo fitting that the brake line attached to. Those have long since disappeared. Well, there's that little spring I was telling you about. So, here's a piston with a seal and then a spring in between the two of them. This one must have been replaced fairly recently, as it is currently the only one I've taken off that hasn't been rusted solid. Good to know. I'll keep it. Rebuild it someday. Here's that fancy little fitting. I really like that. Alright, brake cleaner. Now I'm going to try my best to avoid where the axle bearings are. Brake cleaner. Let's go get the new wheel cylinder. Start putting her back together. Alright, let's set these, and then we can put the drum back on, and this wheel will be done. What I've been doing, and I'm not quite sure if this is the right thing to be doing, but so this is a cam bolt, and it walks this bottom out. So what I've been doing is walking it out all the way. Alright. Well, there was definitely some rust, as well as whatever that leather or material is on the brake rotor shoe. That's all scraped off. Uh-oh. this problem on the passenger side earlier. I think I had the bottom adjustment out too much. That will work just fine. Let me grab a new cotter pen. Now what's left is to adjust the top. Actually, might be easier to do that with a wrench. So what I've been doing is I'll tighten it until I can't turn it anymore, and then I back it off slowly until I can just start hearing it drag a little bit. That's kind of how I've been setting it. Like I said, you're supposed to set it to 12 thousandths, but if it's just lightly dragging, a mile down the road, it'll clear itself. Alright, with that, I'll move on to the other side and get that taken care of. I think that's all I'm going to do for today. The soft lines, I need to figure out a better solution for the front. What I have for the back looks like it will work, but a little bit more research on that. I'll bring you back when I actually start replacing hard lines.